Hi, my name is Indvik, and I'm the Associate Editor of Marketing and Media at Mashable. And this session is on content and commerce. According to Forrester, Americans will spend nearly $200 billion online in 2011, accounting for about a tenth of what U.S. consumers will spend on products and services altogether this year. That figure is expected to grow by nearly a third in the next 4 years. As e-commerce becomes big, or rather bigger business, retail sites are looking for new methods to attract customers and increase their repeat business. Among the more fashionable of these is a model called content and commerce, whereby magazine-like editorials, photo spreads, and videos are being integrated into online shopping experiences to inspire, instruct, and ultimately to sell product. But it's not just retailers getting into the game. Some of the very best existing content creators, including Esquire, GQ, and Vogue, are trying their hands at online retail as they seek out new revenue streams. Esquire and GQ are collaborating with retail companies like JCPenney and Gilt Groupe to develop sites that reflect their respective aesthetics and know-how, while Vogue is selling merchandise directly from its site through a partnership with a fashion startup called Moda Operandi. It's a promising and in some ways uncertain time for both retailers and content creators, which is why I'm excited to bring to the stage 3 individuals who are helping shape this new landscape. Please join me in welcoming Alexis Maybank, co-founder and chief marketing officer of Gilt Groupe, Maureen Mullen, the director of research and advisory services at luxury think tank L2, and David Granger, editor-in-chief of Esquire. Well, I'd like to ask you some questions, but before we begin, could you please introduce yourselves to the audience and tell us what you're up to at the moment in regards to content and commerce? Start with you. You're saying right next to me.
I'm David Granger. I'm the editor-in-chief of Esquire. The thing we're about to launch next week on Wednesday is a men's commerce site, men's apparel commerce site called Clad with the venture arm of JCPenney. It's been a year in the making, and I hope it's good.
I'm Alexis Maybank. I'm the founder of Gilt Groupe, and dating back to our beginnings 4.5 years ago now, we believed wholeheartedly in content and commerce. We wanted to take what is that exciting, inspirational experience, flipping through the pages of a glossy magazine, and bring that online for the first time, but bring the ability to shop directly from that imagery, that line of storytelling through our site. And fast forwarding to today, we have a number of ways in which we've done that even deeper with Gilt Taste, which is our gourmet offering on Gilt Groupe, in which we've partnered very closely with Ruth Reichel, formerly of Gourmet, and with Park and Bond, which is a collaboration between Gilt and GQ.
And I'm Maureen Mullen. I'm the Director of Research and Advisory Services at L2 Think Tank. And what we do at L2, we do a great deal of research, looking not just at several luxury companies in the fashion, the retail, the travel space that are launching wholeheartedly into some of these content and commerce ventures on their own sites. But we also recently did a study looking at the magazine industry, where we ranked the top publications and magazines and started to look at, from the media side, how media companies are starting to merge into commerce companies. So we've looked at it both ways.
And Maureen, I'd like to start with you, since you sort of have a bird's eye view of what's going on with media and retail. For those of us who maybe haven't seen what one of these content and commerce integrations look like, can you describe the experience and what brands and retailers are trying to achieve?
So content and commerce really kind of came into effect, and I think it was largely built out of the luxury space because there's traditionally been this dissonance with luxury brands. And for a long time, not until about 10 years ago, luxury brands didn't think that they could sell direct to consumers through their websites. They didn't think they could bring the romance of this in-store experience through a web environment. So a lot of legendary retailers, Ralph Lauren was one of the first, Net-a-Porter, kind of in the early in the early part of the decade. And Gucci Group have done a fantastic job of trying to kind of bring that romance to life through their stores. And it was kind of, I think, led by brands for the most part. What we've seen over time in the media space is now you see traditional editorial like Esquire, like some of the things that Gilt's doing with Park and Bond actually merging, and you see the media landscape are now actually starting to merge into the e-commerce game. So you see over time media and brands kind of merging together.
And, you know, magazines are only sort of getting into this space recently. Are they at a disadvantage for coming to it late, or how are they approaching it? Has it been aggressive enough?
It seems, and there's a lot of conversation right now around brands becoming media companies, and I think if you look at brands such as Burberry, who have now over more than 9 million followers on their Facebook page and have done a fantastic job through their creative director, Christopher Bailey, putting out content on a daily basis, almost mimicking what is happening on the editorial side. I think brands were earlier to the game, and I think brands have done a better job of becoming media companies than media companies have of becoming brands and retailers. And I think now you sort of see them facing off. And I mean, it's a much different skill set on both cases. I think media companies, it's very difficult to get into that retail game. And I think with brands, it's very difficult to get into the media game. I think brands did it earlier.
Part of your question was whether it's late, if magazines are too late. I don't know, but the market seems so vast that, at least in the commerce space for apparel and in men, the space seems so huge that I'm not sure that there is late. You know.
And Alexis, you know, Gilt really started off on the flash sales model and has recently invested much more heavily in editorial. Why did you decide to start investing in editorial? When did you realize that was important?
Well, at the very beginning, we invested heavily in editorial. We looked at the way in which product was being sold online, and it was typically on mannequins. It was very dry, not very emotional, didn't tell a story. And we wanted to actually show very moving, compelling imagery, which to us is a big part of the content and the way in which you effectively sell product and tell a story. And then we've kind of added the word part of editorial a little bit later in more careful thought and consideration. But at the very beginning, we invested more in that compelling imagery than probably anyone else online. And things have evolved since then, but we would look at sites in which things are being shot on blue cone-headed mannequins, and it just, I didn't feel myself moved by quickly. So today, when I look at the typical buying pattern on Gilt, where people are rushing in hundreds of thousands at the same moment, noon Eastern, every single day, a big part of it is they know they're going to discover that experience of being kind of swept away for 5 or 10 minutes a day. They're coming to discover, not because they know they need a pair of black pants, and that's what draws them in. So in the very beginning, we invested heavily. It's paid off. It's made the site that much more kind of viral and talked about amongst friends. And then we believe that especially if you look at younger consumers, they navigate and they pick up cues and they learn visually first. That's how they jump across the page. That's how they get a storyline. But when they want to go deeper and understand more of the details, that's where written editorial becomes important. And bringing on board, say, Ruth Reichel, who is very much a known expert amongst the foodie crowd, helps give a lot more story behind why a Pat LaFrieda steak is so important. Or partnering with, perhaps someone like Jim Moore at GQ, he brings such a unique relationship with his readers, and which is adding to that kind of tastemaker, curator persona that Gilt is known for. So we've always invested in editorial. We define it as visual content plus written. And then as we have evolved, we've just invested more into kind of becoming that more curated purveyor of product.
I'm really curious to see if the sort of written portion of that is actually going to be effective. I mean, of course, Net-a-Porter, when they kind of started this thing, it made sites that look like women's magazines, women's fashion magazines, and then people can just buy from the pages. And the visual stuff is clearly very effective, whether it's you guys or Net-a-Porter or anybody else. But I just don't know. Maybe you guys have seen, or maybe you've done research as to whether getting instruction and getting sort of traditional magazine style editorial actually encourages people to make purchases. I mean, we're launching the site Clad next Wednesday, and we're doing a good bit of that stuff, and we'll be doing a lot of original editorial for it. But I just don't know if that's going to dovetail yet with purchase activity.
The ways we've seen it be most impactful in the purchase is when we are selling more considered purchases. So home is a big part of our business now, and you sell a mid-century modern look for your living room very differently than you sell the perfect black dress for a cocktail party. So there we add a lot more written content. That written content helps get a lot more people through to the site, obviously through SEO-based initiatives. And I view it as the final mile to selling the product when it's a considered complicated purchase, especially.
But yeah, I think it's a really good point, because there's a lot of brands right now that are really interested in providing content on their sites, and they think, okay, we're going to provide a much stronger experience, and you'll go to the Lancôme Paris site, and instead of being entered into a funnel to purchase a lipstick, you'll be interrupted in watching a minute-long clip of Julia Roberts applying a mascara. And if you think about walking into a Sephora store and being told, wait, stop, you can't buy your foundation, you have to watch the clip of Julia Roberts first, it's absolutely ridiculous. So when you start, I think the content in commerce, what we've found in our research is that when you look at brands, the consumer that's interacting with that content on the site is typically a more valuable consumer. They're converting at a higher rate. They have a higher basket size. But still, when you look at the percentage of page views across a site, it's still a very small percentage of the consumer that's really going deep with that content. So it's really hard to say what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it that consumer who's so obsessed with your brand that they're going to spend 10 minutes on your site reading everything about it? Or is it really a business model for brands moving forward to drive more people towards that content, because that's actually what's driving the behavior on the site, and it's hard to tell.
Well, it's interesting to me because going on Park and Bond, I can find same sort of advice on that site, about how to tie a tie or how to wear tweed, that I can find in the pages of Esquire. As a consumer, where in the future am I going to go for that information? I'll ask David first.
I think you can go a number of places for that. Esquire has been around for a long time, and men know that they can believe in the advice that they get there. I mean, it's only a portion of what we do to give advice, but I see the traffic to Esquire.com, and so much of it is really basic stuff, like best shoes, best velvet blazer, or something like that. But they come to us just looking for those things. So I think there's an inherent level of trust in an established brand like Esquire's. So I don't know. That's what I hope. And we also are pretty good at it.
And as you move further into e-commerce, do you think maybe there's, and sort of with this project with Clad, which you've told me that you'll actually be linking to products that you mentioned that are being sold on Clad. I mean, are you risking the trust of your readers by getting more involved with, selling the product that you're recommending?
On Esquire.com, anytime we do a slideshow, and we do this fantastic thing every day, shoe porn, and it's just like, shoes that kind of make you warm. And there's always links to commerce, to purchase opportunities for these. When Clad is actually launched, they'll just kind of get first preference of entity to link to. So, and we've built up this kind of buffer zone editorially at the magazine. I've hired a separate staff for Clad to create editorial, to create promotional things for Clad, and to create editorial for the site, so that my fashion department is sort of protected from the dirty work of commerce, and that we can retain some level of editorial integrity.
And what? So exactly how will Clad is a joint venture between, or maybe not joint venture, isn't the wrong way to describe it.
Politely call it partnership. We're basically like paid hands in a lot of ways.
And in terms of content, what will you be providing to the site?
Oh, there's a number of different things. There's a huge amount of advice and instruction, like of the things we talked about. There's a lot of information about trends in the season. And based on those trends, we go into Clad's warehouse and into their inventory, and we curate looks based on those trends that we recommend to people. So there's general advice and specific advice, and then we'll be doing kind of semi-amusing things. We'll have these style offs where our fashion director will curate a single look. Our senior fashion editor will create another one, and then the editor for Clad will create another one, and we'll see who drives the most purchase, and make little contests of it. So, I mean, there'll be lots of both sort of evergreen instructional advice and sort of vital new editorial events on the site.
But do you ever see having e-commerce actually on Esquire.com?
Well, right now, the nature of this, well, possibly. I mean, it depends on how Clad goes. I mean, yeah. I mean, right now we'll be driving a lot of traffic from Esquire.com, and that's really the biggest benefit I think that Esquire is going to provide Clad is that, I mean, we've got 725,000 subscribers and 4 million readers. Something. We've got 4 million uniques a month coming to Esquire.com. We've got a big audience around Esquire's Big Black Book, a style manual for men, and we're actually exposing all those people to Clad. And I mean, sort of the promotional efforts on behalf of Esquire will actually create an audience and a consumer base for Clad, at least in the beginning.
And Maureen, I'm curious, what do you think about the way that magazines are approaching e-commerce? I mean, should they be integrating these on their sites? Are they missing this opportunity?
I think there is definitely kind of magazines to a certain extent missed a window of opportunity, which is why, I mean, what magazines really own is they own relationships with brands, and those brands are their advertisers. And I think Gilt, in the existence of Gilt, is almost a missed opportunity on behalf of the magazines, because what Gilt has been able to do, kind of take advantage of a really interesting time where there was a lot of excess inventory, but also develop the same types of relationships around building brands that the magazine business has traditionally done. So that was arguably, I think, an easier, and it doesn't necessarily need to be through the flash sale model, but I think that was kind of the window of opportunity. I think it's much different skill sets between selling a product, and even manufacturers' brands, I think, are dealing with this. They've traditionally sold through retailers, and even brands that launched e-commerce 10 years ago are still very, very much iterating around that experience. But I think over time, you're going to definitely see the lines blur. But I do think there's room for that kind of distinct, authentic, and independent editorial voice, and I don't think that that's going to go away.
And do you think that they're risking it all by getting involved in e-commerce and recommending you go buy something that they might, get a cut out of?
I think what these platforms do is they force magazines to become more retail and commerce oriented, because they're forced to by their business model. But you see the other thing going on with brands, and they're forced to become more authentic. And the brands you see, I mean, traditionally, some of the things that are happening through social media, where all of a sudden, you'll see an Oscar PR girl on Twitter, and she's talking about Oscar de la Renta dresses, but she also realizes that there's not a single woman in the world who wears Oscar de la Renta 24 hours a day. So she's forced to recommend others, and it makes her authentic, and that's where it starts to become a lot scarier for an Esquire or for a Vogue, because she does become this purveyor of taste that has definitely a bent around Oscar de la Renta, but is promoting this lifestyle and has that opportunity to become more of a trusted advisor.
One of the limitations of magazines forever, for as long as there have been magazines, is like one of the essential things that magazines have always done, one of the components, just one of them, is that they've created desire in their consumers, whether it's for a new car or clothes or shoes or whatever it is. And then they've just taken them to the point where they want something and stopped. And what was a consumer supposed to do? Like tear the magazine out and maybe one day go to a store and buy it? Or maybe go to the computer and buy it. This is just like kind of closing the desire loop. This is like letting people want something and then giving them a fairly immediate opportunity to have it. I mean, and the things we mention in our magazine, that we show, feature in our magazine, are things that we believe in, or we wouldn't be recommending them. So I don't see that our decision making as to what to cover is going to be compromised. It's more like, let's just go to the logical next step and offer this stuff to them.
Dave is exactly right. From my standpoint, a Gilt is a marketing platform. And Esquire is a marketing platform. We're in the business of driving desire, creating desire, and discovery. And I think the difference is whether you capture a portion of that business that you're driving or not. So the way we view it is, especially with a younger consumer, that archaic, what I believe is archaic concept between church and state divide that many editorial and magazine publishers have had to deal with in the past. Consumers are smart, they're savvy, they know when they're being pitched something that isn't authentic. And they'll vote by just departing or stop reading or stop visiting. And as a media platform, as a marketing platform, the decision in the future is going to be when you're putting forward product you believe in or when you're telling stories, whether or not you believe or whether or not you choose to capture a portion of that sale, because both of those businesses are driving a tremendous amount of purchasing amongst target consumers. And it's exciting and it's compelling and it's what customers want. But increasingly, they want to be able to buy immediately. They have an urgency. They don't want to have to put down a publication or a magazine and then walk to a store or call around to buy it. Or even worse, go pick up, go try to Google and find the store itself. So they'd rather just have those merged, make it fast, and make it simple.
I do kind of still believe in church and state, and I don't think this compromises that or endangers it at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that when we create a magazine, we do it for the entertainment and edification of our readers, and commerce happens somewhere else, and that we're actually benefiting from a business we're helping to create is almost a totally separate thing. Whereas, I mean, with commerce sites that that are intended to sell, I think the editorial is it's another sales tool. I mean, it's like a different reason for creating editorial. I mean, we write stories because we believe that they're the most important stories to be told at this moment. And so I mean, we're just coming at it from different places, but for my purposes, I do think there's some separation, at least in terms of intention.
Mm-hmm. I don't think consumers, if you're within the framework of a magazine, you care about church and state, but it's a concept that a young consumer, it just doesn't mean anything to them. I know if I'm reading something authentic. I know as a savvy consumer of information, will I buy into this or will I not? And it's just a question of taking whatever point of view you are putting forward similar information, whether you're capturing a portion of that influence, of that transaction that you're driving.
But I mean, as you're putting out, again, as you said, sort of the same kinds of content, you are coming into competition with each other. I mean, how are you going to distinguish yourselves? Like, why should consumers spend, time with your content versus Esquire's?
I don't think, actually, based on examples we're talking about, often we're coming into collaboration together more often than direct competition. But Esquire has a very specific point of view. They have an authenticity. They have a following that consumers trust and buy into. And they are driving a tremendous amount of purchases that happen away from the pages of their magazine. So it's just what happens with that in the future. Gilt, from our perspective, we're building a certain point of view, a sense of curation, a specific brand that stands for something. And in that, we're also capturing a percent of the item we're selling and sort of doing both at the same time. So it's just where you stop. Do you stop at the pages and at content, or do you try to capture what just happens downstream or not?
That makes sense. And, you've invested a great deal in editorials. You mentioned, what does that investment look like?
The investment physically looks like 8 studios in Brooklyn on double shift, models running in and out of our Brooklyn warehouse space, the Navy Yards. It looks like the number of kind of editors we brought in, partnerships with magazines, with former editors like Ruth Reichel. It manifests itself that way. It's primarily an investment in producing that rich imagery, where these studios are on double shift producing 1,500 images a day for our website, and people who are writing compelling additional detail to accompany these storylines.
Now, you've gone after a lot of magazine talent specifically to head up your editorial operations. Why did you go there?
A couple of reasons. We're in the fashion business. So it's a very trend-driven business. It's seasonal. It's exciting. There's a lot of emotion. And there are people already in the business of covering those trends and speaking in a way that connects directly to a fashion-interested audience.
Might also suggest that it does lend a certain amount of credibility when you guys hire Josh Peskowitz away from Esquire.com, and he's got relationships with...
Sorry about that.
Yeah. with literally every fashion brand on earth. Or when you hire Jeremy Lagmead from Esquire in the UK, who's got credibility with every fashion brand.
Maybe you should have sat in between us. I don't know.
So I mean, that's an interesting challenge for you, because these retail companies are coming with a lot of money that they can offer to magazine talent. How are you keeping the rest of them on board?
Turns out there's a lot of people who want to work for traditional magazines. You know, I mean, I have a very limited number of slots, and I never have any trouble filling them. So I don't know. I mean, I love Josh, and Jeremy's very talented, but it is a little bit painful when you realize that you're paying, half of what this kind of competition can pay, and you're also not able to give a piece of the business. So it's a little tough.
Absolutely. And Alexis, you mentioned earlier that you're already seeing a substantial return on this investment you've made in editorial. Can you describe what exactly that looks like?
Well, the first, dating back from the very beginning, is the more excitement and kind of desire you can bring to this whole shopping experience. It's just a natural thing people speak about. So over 60% of our customers who are members of Gilt today have come in from a friend telling another friend about Gilt Groupe. And that's huge. So that viral kind of word of mouth has been tremendously important to our website and to this success today in terms of member referral. People see something, they find it inspirational, they're more likely to continue to talk about it. We've seen a greater likelihood to stay with the site or keep reading longer. So measured by minutes spent on the site. And then clearly those who are just out there doing and performing natural search, given a lot of the way we sell product is very storyline driven. So it's how to, again, bring mid-century modern into your living room, or how to dress for the ultimate summer wedding, or whatever it might be. And that's a powerful kind of attractor of greater interest in readership and ultimately sales.
And I mean, I know your product doesn't actually rank, it's not actually indexed in Google. You're making that content searchable then?
Actually, not all of it, but a lot of it is. Much of our site is behind a registration wall, given the members-only aspect, but increasingly more and more percent of it is outside, indexable, indexed by the spiders.
And we only have a few minutes left, and I do want to give time for the audience to ask questions. So I will just sort of ask you, what are the next steps? How are we going to see this landscape change? And where will the line be drawn between what magazines are online and what retail sites that participate in content? Where will that be drawn? Essentially, I'll start with Maureen.
So I think one of the really interesting trends, and I'm going to just take it to the emerging markets now, and if you look at what's happening in China, which the e-commerce market in China is extremely nascent, 90% of it right now is actually C2C, so it's sites similar to eBay, Alibaba.com. But what's happened in China, and the traditional editorial voice still plays a very big role with traditional media. But if you look at the beauty industry, and I'll again go to Lancome as an example, they've actually aggregated a site that is the #2 beauty blog in all of China, called rosebeauty.com. So imagine for a second that Chanel owned the #1 media site, or the #2 media site in fashion. That's pretty powerful, which is integrated with commerce. And what you see there is that community is 400,000 strong, and you see the consumer doesn't know the difference between the traditional media and the brand, and the brand voice has become much louder. So I think kind of, if you look at this as brands versus media, I think brands win. I think it's a really good time to be a brand right now. I think it's really a difficult time to be ad-supported media. But there's obviously a lot to play out.
I don't believe there's a line anymore. I think the two have merged. I think both are incredibly important in their own right, and it's just going to be a choice of how far brands choose to play in content creation, and how much publications choose to play not just in content, but also on the commerce side of the envelope. I think the line's gone. I don't think consumers care about it. And I think you see that increasingly measured by how they're voting with their own wallets. So that's how I view kind of the state today. If not 100%, we're going to be getting there very quickly. And I think what you'll see is just big changes in the way that is digested and consumed. So already in our own business, we see mobile as a tremendous way in which they're engaging with us on their terms at their time, and as is just a significant driver of revenue for us today, and will be increasingly for others.
I don't have any predictions. We're just launching next week. I got no idea.
Well, we'll know a little bit more on Wednesday then. There's a microphone here and a microphone here if anyone wants to pose a question to any of our panelists. Or you can raise your hand. I'll try to see you through the glare. Okay. You're right next to the microphone.
I was in online magazines back in the mid-'90s, and at the time, American Society of Magazine editors had very, very strict standards against content and commerce, and I'm wondering if that changed, if your old school editors fell on their swords, or what happened in the back rooms.
I think there's a fairly, as I was trying to say, we've tried to create a buffer between at least my editorial staff and what's going on Clad. But I think there's still fairly clearly drawn lines about what constitutes editorial integrity, what is editorial that is created because it's a great idea and it needs to be expressed well, and what is paid for by advertisers. I don't think American Society of Magazine editors have fallen down on that at all. But I do think that everybody's realizing that there's so much potential out there for new businesses that we have to leap in and take advantage of it. Somebody else.
Okay, yeah.
Hi. Alexis, you used the word authenticity about 20 times. I'm wondering if you can tell me what you mean by that.
Sure. With the consumers as savvy and as educated as they are today, they know when they're being peddled products. They know when they're being pitched something that is not very compelling, or not something they need, or not targeted towards them. So I use authenticity as a consumer indicator of, am I just being pushed stuff, or are these things that are really directed to me, that are specifically something I'd be interested in? And that's what they'll purchase. That's what they will read. That's what they will consume. And it's less about looking and peeling back the layers and saying, well, was it such and such editor, or is it a on-staff writer at a business, where it's coming from? I'm smart. I'm savvy as a consumer. I can tell when something is authentic and real, and specifically aimed at me in a way that I care about.
Well, I'm sorry to say that we're out of time, but we are. Oh, I missed one.
One more.
Okay, well.
She walked all the way down.
No, go for it.
Thank you. I'm wondering what the panel sees the role of social media in terms of the purchase decisions of a luxury consumer.
I don't know, you guys have.
It was the question, what's the role of social media in the purchase decision? Well, social media plays in heavily to Gilt Groupe and what it is we do, but we see it in really two separate ways. One, we use it a lot for customer satisfaction, retention. We follow every comment made across the entire social sphere. About Gilt, we respond both to positive and negative with equal levels of excitement, and within a very short time period. So that just helps us bring that very direct and personal relationship with the customer. It reinforces the kind of trust in the brand and the likelihood to buy. And then the second is through Facebook and Facebook Store and their involvement on Twitter. We take that as a way to take our product and information and insert it directly into the conversation. Every day at noon when sales starts, you see just Twitter blow up about Lady Gaga dress by Terry Mugler. So for us, it's a way to just insert what it is we're selling and our content directly into the conversation.
Okay. Well, now we really are over time. So thank you, all three of you, so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.